Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And Ginny, you got me all wound up for today's topic. And so I'm
Yes.
sort of frothing at the mouth here. I'm going to try to control myself, but I'm not trying to do a funny opening because I just got too amped up in the lead-in.
Oh, okay.
And I was
Well,
afraid,
good.
I was afraid of what I might say.
I like amped up, Chip. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I'm trying to dial it down to keep it
Why?
at a level where we don't get kicked off of any of the platforms we're on, and my hate mail is limited to a minimum and all of that kind of stuff.
That doesn't happen.
No, that's true. I don't get that.
No.
But
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I mean, I would think with some of the things that you and I say on this show, we would get some people who are like, I cannot believe you said that.
Maybe we do, and they just don't report it to us or to the podcast platform.
That's true. Or maybe they include it in one of the inane podcast pitches that we get that I just hit delete without actually
Jeez
reading.
Louise, it's so bad. My favorite is when they pitch the FIR network and Shell Holtz forwards emails to the two of us, and he's like, "Oh, here's another prize."
Yep. I mean, I can tell most of them when they're really poorly targeted because those usually come into my iCloud email address.
Oh, interesting.
Which is what I've registered the podcast with for Apple Podcasts.
Got it.
But it's literally the only email I ever get on that account. So I know as soon as it comes in that they have not done any research because that email address is not published anywhere. I don't use it for anything.
Interesting. So how would they get it? Through one of the systems or through one of the platforms?
I think so. It's probably in the metadata somewhere.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of smart podcast pitchers out there, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot of smart pitchers generally, just based on my inbox and based on some of the private communities I'm in.
Well, I mean, yes, and I do get because of my various blogs and because I used to have a political newsletter, I get an insane number of actual pitches for people who think that I am proper media,
right?
But they are wildly poorly targeted.
Yeah,
and I'm tempted to say, look, I haven't done food and beverage reporting for 15 years now, so I still get a lot of political pitches.
Do you?
I have not had a political newsletter since 2015.
Wow.
So stop. Just stop.
Yeah. I get a lot of Chicago area stuff, which is fine because I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. But I've literally never covered Chicago.
Correct. Oh, yeah. I get all the New Hampshire stuff and like, oh, so-and-so got a grant. I don't care.
Okay.
I mean, that's
great. Awesome.
Congratulations to them. But I don't know what I'm going to do with this information. So maybe go get a different list. Anyway. All right. Well, now that we've ranted about things that have nothing to do with our actual topic, what are we going to rant about today, Ginny?
There was an interesting conversation in one of the groups I belong to, and it was essentially this. Have you considered charging for your proposal and baseline ideas? Most professional service providers charge to assess the situation. After all these years, we still provide the outline of an actual plan and sometimes a campaign concept absolutely free of charge. Stop doing that. The discovery part of our process generally takes time, yes. Then the proposal is written and fine-tuned, and then there's a presentation. We do close 2 out of 3 engagements we pursue. Still, I can't imagine a CPA or a law firm doing this kind of work. Why do we? Well, we shouldn't. Let's not do that.
Yeah. So it is incredibly common for agencies to try to provide fairly robust plans as part of proposals or worse, as part of RFP processes.
Right.
There is way too much detail included in almost all of these. And I'll be honest, my issue is not that you're doing it for free, not that you're not charging for it. It's that you're being stupid because you are submitting a prescription for how to solve a problem before you really have much information. We've said time and time again that as part of the sales process, you have maybe a couple of hours of conversation with a prospect. That is not nearly enough time to really understand what the right approach to solving that problem is. You may know in broad brushstrokes what is likely to be the case, but you don't know enough to put together a detailed plan. So whether you're paid for it or not, stop doing that.
Yes, please. I 100% agree with this. We stopped doing it many years ago. But I love your analogy on this, so I'm going to let you take it because it works perfectly here.
So this is putting together a detailed proposal that includes the outline of a plan would be pretty much the same as if you walked into your doctor's office and said, "Hey, doc, I'm not feeling well today." And the doctor looks at you once and says, "You know what? I've got the prescription for you." And they immediately write you a prescription or schedule a surgery or something like that. They can't do that because they don't have enough information.
Right.
Even when, based on their experience, they have a pretty good idea what it is, they still order tests. They do blood work. They do other tests. They take X-rays, whatever it may be, to confirm that what they suspect is actually what they need to treat you for.
That's right.
You need to view your clients and prospects the same way. You should not be in a position of having one phone call with a client or prospect and saying, "Yep, know what that is. Here's how we'll fix that, and here's what it costs."
And I think saying to the prospect, if they're expecting a plan or, detail like that, I think it's really important for us to say, like, we just don't know yet. We need to know your business. Like, we can do some discovery and learn about you, what's online for sure. But that's not enough. We have to actually dig into your business and understand how the business is run. Do we have experience in your industry? Of course we do. Do we know kind of the approach we might take? Of course we do. But we have to create a prescription direct exactly for you and your business so that we can have success. And we can't do that without spending, 30 or 60 days with you and getting to know and understand your business.
Right. So if we don't think that you should be putting together these detailed plans as part of your proposals, what should you do instead?
I mean, probably, gosh, 10 years ago, we started we have sort of a three-phased approach. And the first phase is, for lack of a better term, discovery. So the client is paying us to learn their business, understand their business, talk to their stakeholders, talk to their employees, talk to people that are important to them, talk to customers, talk to former customers, do all of that work to really understand what the pain points are. And through that, we also do some things which I would call quick wins or low hanging fruit, right? Because the client doesn't always want to pay for quote unquote strategy. So there are some things you can do immediately. We'll do an audit. We'll look at, because we always do the peso model, we look to see if they're doing a full, if they're doing paid, earn, shared, and own, what's missing, what's not, if it's fully integrated. So we can do that as we go along as well. And we can do some quick wins in terms of like, oh, Halloween's coming up. Let's do some themed social media for that. So give them some tangible things while we're doing the discovery and learning the business that are easy, right? And not dependent on a strategy. Make them feel like we're making progress, but getting the information that we need. And then once we go from that, we craft the plan, which is the second phase. They're paying for that. And then we start to execute. So it's sort of that three phase. And what we have found is it's a lot easier for a prospect to swallow a three-phase plan because what they are in their minds, they're thinking, okay, well, if this first phase doesn't work out, first of all, it's not terribly expensive. And if it doesn't work out, then we don't have to do the second and third phases. We can just take it and do it ourselves, right? So whether or not they're in love with you, that's just human nature, what they're thinking. And what we have found is that because they don't feel like they've been roped into an annual contract where they may or may not get results, they've been roped into discovery or strategy building or however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. And they always spend more money on the execution than they would if we went right to execution in the beginning. They always do,
Mhm.
because they see the value and they understand now how you've become a partner in their business versus just, this is what we do for everybody else, so we're going to do it for you.
Well, and as we've said before, it also gives you an opportunity to make sure that you are pricing that work correctly,
And
because now
it's a good
you
relationship
have
for
more
you too. Right.
information,
Yep.
including how
Yep.
the client is to work with and how
Absolutely.
responsive they
Yes.
are to your information requests or approvals or feedback or all of the
Yes.
things that make a big difference in your profit margins as an agency and your ability to deliver effective results for them. I think the bottom line is that one way or another, it's not so much that you need to get paid for it, but that it needs to be part of your process,
Hmm.
that you do an actual diagnosis while engaged with the client and not prior to,
Right.
because you simply can't do it in the amount of time and with the amount of resources that you have available from the client before you're actually working with them. And whether you do that in a formally staged process or you simply sell audits or some form of paid discovery as a standalone, door opener kind of activity, or as some of my clients do, you simply say, look, for the first month of our retainer, we're going to be focused on building a plan. And that
Sure.
is the focus
Yep.
for the first 30 or 60
Yep.
days. And you're setting
Yep.
that expectation, and it will refine the specifics as we move along. And that may require us to adjust, to come back to you and say, we need to adjust this retainer up or down based on what we find and what the best approach is. And if you do this effectively, you're not only coming up with a better solution for the client, but you're building trust with them for the reasons that you outline,
Yes.
because they are now looking at you as the expert who is trying to spend their money more effectively.
Yep.
The challenge, however, of course, is that most clients say they want a plan, but they don't like
Right.
the planning process.
That is right.
And
Yes.
because for a few reasons, the top of the reason is because they want to see results immediately.
Yes.
And so I think your suggestion that you find low-hanging fruit that you can deliver prior to the formulation of the proper strategy, because there are little things that we almost certainly know going into an engagement will need to be done regardless of what the diagnosis is. And so why not throw some of those into the mix for those first 30 or 60 days in
Yeah.
order to start
Right.
showing some progress? But that is wildly different from starting down the path of a 3-month project that only at the end shows a result. And maybe by the time you get halfway through, you realize, well, this doesn't make any sense. This is not what they actually need. We
Right.
can't actually get the results that we want from it. So
Yeah.
you need to really be thinking about these things in the process of planning effectively.
Yeah. Okay. So let's assume everybody is on board with that. Then I would think the next argument is, well, the way I've always done this, I get I close 70% or 75% of my prospects. I don't want to lose that. So what's our argument there?
So, I mean, my argument there is first of all, I believe that it is unlikely that the reason why you are closing that percentage is because you are taking so many wild stabs in the
Right.
dark.
Yes.
It is entirely probable, in fact, that they would have gone with you whether you had that level of detail or not. Now, if you switch to our proposed approach and all of a sudden you see your close rate plummeting, okay, now you need to take a look at what you've changed and is there a different way to go about it? However, I think it is extremely unlikely
Yeah.
that you would find switching to us would have that kind of a dramatic impact on your close rate. I think the other thing to look at is, for the business that you have won, do you feel like that you have properly diagnosed in all of these cases in that initial plan?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you find that, as I think is likely, there would be adjustments that you would have made along the way had you had more information
Mm-hmm.
that may have also helped you adapt your pricing so that you're more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are all arguments that even if you won the business, it was not the right way to win it.
Right.
And so you would have been better off winning it in a different way, at a different price, with a different scope, or what have you. So you need to look at the big picture. And finally, you also need to look at what are the costs of the ones that you create
Right.
and don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because I mean, particularly when I talk to people about RFPs, people, they talk about the one big RFP that they won, and they say, well, I can't give up RFPs because we got this one back in 2017, and it's really been the driver for our business for the last 8 years, and blah blah blah. Okay, cool. But how many RFPs did you lose along the way?
Right.
And once you factor in the cost of responding to all of those, did it still make sense? And so you need to be looking at that, and not just the 2 out of 3 that you've won. And honestly, if you're winning 2 out of 3, I would probably look at whether you're talking to enough people, because you could probably grow even faster if you had a slightly
Right.
lower
Yes.
close rate. Oh, it does depend a little bit on when you're creating these, because I would say the vast majority of agencies create proposals way too early. And so they're not taking it this far along in the process. But if you're at least holding back until it's almost a done deal, well, then 2 out of 3 is probably a reasonable close rate. But if these are all of your serious conversations, you're not having enough.
I totally agree with that. And I was going to say, I would 100% agree with you and would venture to guess that if you have more conversations, you will get a higher close rate because using our process, because there's no risk to the client. I mean, they might be out a few bucks, but they were going to spend the money anyway. And you both learn if it's a great relationship for you. So I actually think your close rate would be higher if you use this process and talk to more prospects.
It certainly ought to be.
Yeah,
Obviously there's nuances to every
sure.
agency's target audience and their appetite for, for doing things and whether they want to be more reckless or not. If you're dealing with startups, they're probably less inclined to pay for some kind of planning process, right? Because startups are notorious for wanting to just roll the dice and see what happens.
Right,
It's
right.
not necessarily the right approach, but it is the mentality that a lot of tech startups historically have had, and so you need to be conscious of that. But I would say the vast majority of prospects that listeners are going after will be open to this, particularly if you're positioning it in a way that explains to them that you're trying to make sure that you're not wasting their time and money.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, the reason why people tend to be leery of hiring agencies is because they're worried about throwing money away, because
Yep.
maybe they had bad experiences with past agencies that they feel like we paid them a lot of money and we didn't see any results. And part of that may be because that agency gave them a proposal and a solution without information.
Right.
And so, and then of course, as we are, we have a contract in place, we have a plan, we feel obligated to march forward on the path that we've given the client.
Right.
And so that's the other thing I would say is even if you go through this and you do a 30-day plan or something like that with the planning process rather with the client, don't feel like 6 months later you can't go back and say, hey, look, we have even more information now. We need to course correct. We need to pivot. Yes, it creates a risk because now you're talking with the client and admitting that your diagnosis may have been either off base or not as full as it should have been or whatever, but you're putting yourself in a position where you can actually get the results that the client is looking for.
Right.
And so to me, it's worth the risk of pivoting even somewhere down the road in the relationship.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before, but one of the things that we implemented during the pandemic was quarterly assessments, so that we're looking at the plan every quarter to understand, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to tweak, we're constantly doing that. And yeah, of course it's risky because you are
Sure.
admitting that some things didn't work, but what it does is creates even more trust because the client looks at you and goes, "Oh, well, they're not just feeding me full of baloney. They're actually being honest about what worked and what didn't. And they're willing to pivot and make change so that the things that aren't working, either we're getting rid of and not doing, or we're tweaking it to make it more effective." So I think you build even more trust when you create that kind of cadence that allows the client to be involved in the planning decisions and planning discussions and measurement too, to understand what's working and what's not.
Yeah, and this is people know that I like weird analogies, I think, if they've listened to this show at all. And if you think about it, if you're in an Uber and you know that you're going on the shortest route to the location you're trying to get to, and it's the route that you have endorsed and say, yeah, that's the way we should go. We should go the West Side Highway or whatever. If the road is flooded in front of you,
Right.
you don't want your Uber driver just to keep driving straight into the flood. You
Nope.
want them to go off and go
Yep.
around it, even though that
Yep.
technically takes longer, because you know what? You're not going to drown in the flood.
Yeah.
You should
Or
be the
get
same
stuck.
way with your
Yeah.
clients and say, hey, look,
Yes.
I see we've got bad weather
I love
ahead.
that.
Let's
Or
let's let's let's
traffic.
go
We have
around it.
bad traffic ahead.
Traffic, anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
You've got to use judgment
Yes.
here.
Love that.
You are being paid as an expert to use your judgment at all steps of the process. And if you ever feel that you are in a position where your expertise is either not valued or you don't feel comfortable delivering it, then you're in the wrong relationship and need to look elsewhere.
Absolutely. Yes. And that is a different discussion for a different time. But
It is.
I have a client right now I'm like, red flags. Let's address the red flags.
Red flags. Well,
Yes.
maybe we'll talk about red flags again
Okay.
sometime soon because I think it's been a while since we've ranted about
It
red
has. Yeah.
flags, but I think we'll draw this rant to a close before we go too far off the rails. But I think I controlled myself pretty well.
You did. You did.
I think I got most of the bad energy out before we hit record,
I didn't
so
even
that
think
I
it
could
was
have
bad
a
energy.
more
But yes,
modest rant.
You did. You did very well.
Thank
did
you.
Very well.
Thank
You're
you. I'll
welcome.
pat myself on the head there for that. So, on that note, we will draw this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast to a close. I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And it depends.